The Dominion had ruled the galaxy for 10,000 years. They had conquered over 200 worlds across dozens of star systems. Their warships were the largest ever built. Their weapons could crack planets in half. Their soldiers had never known defeat. When High Commander received the report about a small blue planet on the outer spiral arm of the galaxy, he did not even bother to read the full briefing. It was just another world to add to their empire, just another species to harvest. The planet was called Earth by its inhabitants. The species called themselves humans. According to the initial scans, they were a primitive race that had only recently discovered how to travel between stars. Their technology was laughable. Their largest warships were small patrol vessels stationed near a colony on the fourth planet of their system, looked at the data and felt nothing but boredom. This conquest would take less than a single rotation of their. He gave the order to advance. 312 warships entered hyperspace and began the journey toward the tiny blue world. Commander Jake was 42 years old and had served in the United Earth Fleet for 20 years. He commanded the patrol cruiser Intrepid, one of 12 ships assigned to protect the Mars colony. It was a quiet posting. Nothing ever happened in this part of space. The most exciting thing Jake had dealt with in the past year was a malfunctioning cargo beacon near the asteroid belt. That changed on a cold Tuesday morning when his sensor officer, Lieutenant Amy Torres, detected something strange near the outer edge of the solar system. "Commander, I am picking up multiple hyperspace signatures," Amy said. Her voice was calm, but her hands were shaking slightly as she worked her console. "A lot of signatures, more than I have ever seen." Jake walked over to her station and looked at the display. The numbers did not make sense. He asked her to run the scan again. She did. The numbers stayed the same. 312 contacts, all of them large, all of them heading directly toward Mars. "Open a channel to Mars Command," Jake said, "and start broadcasting on all frequencies. Maybe they are friendly." They were not friendly. The fleet emerged from hyperspace like a swarm of metal locusts. Their ships were black and angular, covered in weapons that glowed with purple energy. They did not respond to any of the human hails. They did not slow down. They did not negotiate. The first shots were fired at exactly 1400 hours Earth Standard Time. The Mars defense stations, orbital platforms built to protect the colony from asteroid impacts, lasted exactly 7 minutes. The weapons cut through their shields like they were made of paper. Jake watched the stations explode one by one on his display, each explosion representing dozens of lives lost. "All ships fall back to the colony," he ordered. "We need to evacuate as many people as we can." But there was no time. The fleet moved faster than anything Jake had ever seen. Within an hour, they were in orbit around Mars. Within 2 hours, they began their bombardment. New Horizon was the largest human settlement outside of Earth. 50,000 people lived there, in domed cities spread across the red surface of the planet. Scientists, miners, families, children. They had come to Mars to build a new future for humanity. They had come to explore the stars. They never got the chance. The bombardment lasted for 6 hours. When it was over, nothing remained of New Horizon except smoking craters and twisted metal. The ships did not even bother to land. They simply erased the colony from existence and moved on. Jake watched it all from the bridge of the Intrepid. His ship was too small to fight. His weapons were too weak to scratch the enemy hulls. All he could do was watch and record and send desperate messages back to Earth. "This is Commander Jake of the United Earth Fleet," he said into the recorder. His voice was steady even though his heart was breaking. "Mars has fallen. Repeat, Mars has fallen. Enemy fleet consists of over 300 capital ships. They are not responding to communication attempts. They are not taking prisoners. Recommend immediate evacuation of all outer system colonies. Recommend full mobilization of Earth Defense Forces. God help us all." On the bridge of the flagship, High Commander received reports of the Mars operation with mild satisfaction. The conquest was proceeding exactly as expected. The primitive humans had put up no meaningful resistance. Their weapons were pathetic. Their ships were toys. This species would make excellent servants once they were properly broken. His tactical officer approached with a data tablet. "High Commander, we have intercepted communications from the surviving human vessels. They appear to be sending warnings back to their..." Made a dismissive gesture with one of his four arms. "Let them send their warnings. Let them prepare their defenses. It will make no difference. We have crushed 1,000 species who thought they could resist us. These humans will be no different." But had made a mistake, a fatal mistake that would cost him everything. He had not read the full briefing on Earth. He had not seen the classification that every other spacefaring species in the galaxy knew by heart. Earth was not just another world. Earth was listed in every galactic database as a Category 12. Category 12 was the highest possible danger rating. It meant that the planet was so hostile, so violent, so utterly lethal that no sane species would ever attempt to colonize it. The gravity was crushing. The atmosphere was corrosive. The weather patterns were catastrophic. The wildlife was murderous. Even the bacteria could kill. And yet humans had not only survived on this nightmare world. They had thrived. They had conquered their planet and reached for the stars. Every human alive was the descendant of millions of years of survivors. Their bodies could heal from wounds that would kill most species. Their minds could adapt to trauma that would drive others insane. Their spirits could endure suffering that would break any other creature in the galaxy. They saw humans as prey. They saw them as weak little creatures to be harvested and enslaved. They were wrong. Humans were not prey. Humans had never been prey. On their deadly, they had climbed to the top of the food chain through pure stubbornness and savage determination. They had killed everything that tried to kill them. They had survived everything that tried to destroy them. And now, for the first time in their history, they faced a threat from beyond their world. An enemy that wanted to wipe them out completely. They expected them to run. They expected them to hide. They expected them to beg for mercy. They had no idea what was coming. Admiral Laura had served in the United Earth Fleet for 31 years. She had fought pirates in the asteroid belt. She had negotiated treaties with 3 alien species. She had commanded the largest military operation in human history when they established the Jupiter Station outpost. Nothing in her long career had prepared her for this moment. She stood in the command center deep beneath the surface of the moon, watching the tactical display with cold eyes. The blue dots representing human ships were scattered and few. The red dots representing the fleet were countless and growing closer with every passing hour. Mars was gone. Jupiter Station had been destroyed 2 days ago. The Saturn research outpost had gone silent yesterday. One by one, the outer colonies were being erased from existence. And now the enemy was coming for the last line of defense before Earth itself. Captain Ben stood beside her, his face pale but his voice steady. "Admiral, the latest count shows 263 enemy warships still operational. We have 47 combat-ready vessels in the Lunar Defense Fleet." Laura did the math in her head. It was not good math. What about the orbital defense platforms? 12 stations operational around Earth, 6 around the Moon. But Admiral, their weapons barely scratched the enemy ships at Mars. We have been studying the wreckage from the outer system battles. Their hull plating is unlike anything we have ever seen. Our standard weapons just bounce off. Laura closed her eyes for a moment. She thought about her daughter, who lived in Seattle with her husband and 2 children. She thought about the billions of people on Earth who were going about their daily lives, trusting that the fleet would protect them. She thought about all the things she had planned to do after she retired next year. None of that mattered now. The only thing that mattered was buying time. Every hour she could delay the enemy was another hour for evacuations, another hour for Earth to prepare, another hour for some miracle to save them. How long until the enemy fleet reaches lunar orbit? She asked. 14 hours at their current speed. 14 hours. That was all the time they had left. Laura walked to the center of the command room where the main communication console waited. Her officers watched her in silence. They knew what she was about to do. They knew what it meant. She activated the emergency beacon. It was a frequency that had been established when humanity first joined the Galactic Accord, a loose alliance of spacefaring species that shared information and trade routes. The frequency was reserved for one purpose only: extinction-level emergencies. No human had ever used it before. Laura hoped she would be the last. All ships, all stations, all colonies, she spoke into the transmitter. Her voice was calm and clear, the voice of a commander who had made peace with death. This is Admiral Laura of United Earth Command. The is under attack. The enemy fleet numbers over 250 capital ships. They have destroyed our outer colonies without mercy. They are not negotiating. They are not taking prisoners. We are facing total annihilation. She paused and took a breath. Around her, officers and technicians stood frozen, listening to words that would echo across the galaxy. If you can hear this message wherever you are, I am asking you to come home. Every ship, every pilot, every human being who can fight. Come home and stand with us. We may not win. We may not survive, but we will not go quietly into the darkness. We will not let them take our world without a fight. Come home. Come home and fight. She ended the transmission. The signal pulsed outward at faster-than-light speeds, racing through the void toward distant stars where human ships had ventured over the past century. It would reach the nearest colonies within hours. The farthest outposts would receive it within days. But would anyone answer? And even if they did, would they arrive in time? On the bridge of the flagship, High Commander listened to the intercepted transmission with amusement. His communication officer had translated the message for him, and he found it deeply entertaining. "A distress call," he said to his senior officers. "How precious! They are begging their scattered ships to come and die with them." His tactical officer, a younger named, studied his console with a frown. "High Commander, our sensors show that the humans have ships deployed across a wide area of space. If even a fraction of them respond to this message, we could face significant reinforcements." Made the wet gurgling sound that passed for laughter among his kind. "Let them come. What are a few more insects against the might of our fleet? We have crushed species far more advanced than these primitives. Their scattered merchant ships and survey vessels will make no difference." He leaned back in his command chair, his four eyes fixed on the blue and white marble that was growing larger in the viewport. Such a pretty little world. Such a shame it was inhabited by creatures too stupid to know when they were beaten. "Increase speed," he ordered. "I want this finished before the next cycle. Earth will fall by dawn." Back on the moon, Admiral Laura made her final preparations. She called her daughter and told her she loved her. She recorded a message for her, words they might never hear if the worst happened. Then she put away her personal feelings and became the Admiral again. "All ships, this is Admiral," she broadcast to the Lunar Defense Fleet. "The enemy will be here in 14 hours. Our mission is simple. We hold the line. We fight with everything we have. We buy time for Earth to prepare and for our people across the galaxy to answer the call." She looked at the tactical display one more time. 47 ships against 263. The numbers were impossible. Every officer in the fleet knew they were going to die. But not one of them requested a transfer. Not one of them asked to leave. They were human beings, born on a world that had tried to kill them every day of their existence. Their ancestors had survived ice ages and plagues and wars and disasters that should have wiped them out 100 times over. They were not going to run now. Commander Jake had brought the Intrepid back from Mars, one of the few ships to escape the massacre. He had not slept in 3 days. He had watched his friends die. He had seen colonies burn to ash. And now he was preparing to fight again. "All stations report ready status," he said to his crew. Lieutenant Amy Torres looked up from her console. Her eyes were red from crying, but her hands were steady on the controls. "Weapons charged and ready, Commander." Jake nodded. "Then let us make them pay for every kilometer they take." Across the Lunar Defense Fleet, 47 ships prepared for a battle they could not win. They checked their weapons. They said their prayers. They thought about the people they loved. And they waited for the enemy to come. The message reached 442B at exactly 3:42 local time. Captain was sleeping in his quarters aboard the mining support vessel Nomad when his communication officer woke him with the news. He listened to Admiral's words 3 times, sitting in the darkness of his small cabin, feeling the weight of them settle into his bones. "Come home and fight." Was 45 years old. He had left Earth when he was 22, chasing adventure and fortune in the frontier systems. He had not been back to his in over a decade. His parents were dead. His sister had stopped writing years ago. He had built a new life out here among the stars, and he had told himself that Earth was just a distant memory. But it was not. It had never been. Earth was still home. Earth would always be home. He walked to the bridge of the Nomad and found his crew already assembled. They had heard the message too. They were waiting for him to tell them what to do. "Set course for Earth," said. "Maximum burn, we leave in 30 minutes." Nobody argued. Nobody asked about the mining contract they were abandoning. Nobody mentioned the money they would lose or the trouble they would face when the company found out. They simply went to their stations and began the calculations for the long journey home. The same scene was playing out across the galaxy, in places would never know about, on ships he would never see. On Trappist Station, a diplomatic outpost near the border of space, Commander Vance received the message during a tense negotiation with alien traders. She read it once, then stood up from the conference table and walked out without a word. Within an hour, she had her escort fleet of 4 military frigates and was burning toward Earth at maximum speed. Near the Cygnus Rift, the cargo hauler Perseverance was delivering medical supplies to a remote colony when Captain Greg Mason picked up the signal. He was a former military pilot who had left the service after a disagreement with his commanding officer. He had sworn he would never fight for the fleet again. But this was not about the fleet. This was about Earth. "Dump the cargo," he told his crew. "We are going home." His engineer, a young woman named Lisa Park, looked at him with wide eyes. "Captain, that cargo is worth 3 million credits. The company will blacklist us." Greg shrugged. "If Earth falls, there will not be any company left to blacklist us. Now dump the cargo and spin up the engines. We have a long way to go." From the Andromeda Research Outpost, a scientific station studying distant galaxies, Dr. Cole commandeered a survey vessel that had no weapons and no armor. It was designed for observation, not combat, but had studied human history. She knew that her ancestors had once crossed oceans in wooden boats to fight for their homes. A survey vessel was better than a wooden boat. She joined a convoy of 7 ships heading toward Earth. Most of them were civilian vessels with no military training. They knew they were probably flying to their deaths. They went anyway. In the lawless systems of the outer territories, where pirates and smugglers operated beyond the reach of any government, the message caused something unexpected. Ships that had spent years running from the law suddenly changed course. Criminals who had been enemies for decades looked at each other and nodded in silent agreement. Old grudges could wait. Earth came first. Captain Cole ran a smuggling operation out of a hidden base in the asteroid fields of an unnamed system. He had a bounty on his head from 3 different governments. He had not spoken to his family in 15 years. But when he heard Admiral's voice echoing through his ship, he felt something stir in his chest that he had thought was dead. "All hands," he announced to his crew of outlaws and outcasts, "we are going home." They had no way to understand what was happening. Their spies and sensors reported the movement of human ships from across the galaxy, all converging on the same destination. High Commander reviewed the data and dismissed it as irrelevant. "Merchant ships," he said with contempt. "Survey vessels, mining platforms. What can such trash do against our warships?" His tactical officer was less certain. "High Commander, the numbers are significant. If even half of these vessels reach Earth before we complete our conquest, we could face resistance from multiple directions." Waved away the concern with one of his four hands. "You worry too much. These creatures are running toward their deaths. Let them come. We will crush them all together." But could not shake his unease. He had studied the files on Earth more carefully than his commander. He knew about the Category 12 classification. He knew that humans came from a world of unimaginable violence and danger, and he was beginning to suspect that the Dominion had made a terrible mistake. The human ships kept coming. From every corner of explored space, they turned toward home. Some were fast military vessels that would arrive in hours. Some were slow freighters that would take days. Some were so far away that they would not reach Earth until the battle was long over. They came anyway. On the Nomad, Captain pushed his engines beyond their safety limits. Warning lights flashed on every console. His engineer warned him that the reactor could fail at any moment. Did not care. Every hour he saved was another hour he could fight. He thought about his sister, who he had not spoken to in years. He thought about the little house in Colorado where he had grown up. He thought about summer days and winter nights and the smell of rain on dry earth. He thought about what the aliens would do to all of that if they won. "More power to the engines," he told his engineer. "I do not care if we burn them out, we just need to get there." The engineer nodded and went to work. Behind them, the stars blurred and stretched as the Nomad pushed itself beyond its limits. Across the galaxy, hundreds of other ships were doing the same thing. Humans who had never met each other, who would never know each other's names, were all making the same choice. They were abandoning safety and comfort and survival. They were flying toward almost certain death. Because that was what humans did. When their home was threatened, they did not calculate the odds. They did not weigh the costs and benefits. They simply went home and fought. They called it madness. They called it stupidity. They called it the foolish bravery of primitive creatures who did not know any better. They were wrong. It was not madness or stupidity or foolish bravery. It was humanity. And it was coming home. The fleet arrived at the moon exactly when High Commander predicted. His ships filled the void between Earth and its natural satellite, a wall of black metal and purple weapons that blocked out the stars. He looked at the pathetic human defense fleet and felt nothing but contempt. 47 ships. 47 tiny vessels crewed by creatures who were too stupid to know they were already dead. "Begin the assault," ordered. "I want this finished within the hour." The battle opened with fire from both sides. Human weapons lashed out against the hulls, leaving scorch marks but little real damage. Weapons responded with devastating force, cutting through shields and armor like knives through flesh. The first human ship died within 30 seconds, then another, then another. Admiral Laura watched from her command bunker beneath the lunar surface, her hands gripping the edge of her console until her knuckles turned white. Her ships were dying, her people were dying, and there was nothing she could do except keep fighting. "All vessels maintain formation," she ordered. "Focus fire on their smaller escorts. Make them pay for every ship they take." The human fleet fought with desperate courage. Commander Jake led the Intrepid into the heart of the enemy formation, his weapons blazing even as hits rocked his ship from every direction. Lieutenant Amy Torres worked her targeting console with tears streaming down her face, scoring hits on enemy vessels that probably did not even notice. The battle raged for 2 hours. The human fleet was cut in half, then cut in half again. 20 ships became 10, 10 became 5. watched his victory unfold with satisfaction. Then something strange happened. A single ship dropped out of hyperspace directly into the middle of the formation. It was a battered cargo freighter, old and worn, and clearly not designed for combat. The barely had time to register its presence before it flew directly into the side of a destroyer and detonated its reactor core. The explosion destroyed the freighter instantly. It also destroyed 3 vessels that were too close to escape the blast. Before anyone could react, another ship arrived, then another, then a dozen more. Captain brought the Nomad out of hyperspace with its engines screaming and its hull glowing from the stress of the journey. He had pushed his ship beyond its limits, and now he was ready to push it even further. "All weapons fire," he commanded. "Target anything with a purple glow." The Nomad was half the size of the smallest cruiser. Its weapons were designed for asteroid mining, not combat. It should have been destroyed in the first exchange. But had not come here to be destroyed. He had come here to fight. He threw his ship into a spinning dive that took it beneath the belly of a battleship, firing continuously as he went. The mining lasers carved deep grooves into the enemy hull, finding weak points where the armor was thinner. Behind him, 2 more civilian ships followed his lead, attacking the same target from different angles. The battleship's shields failed, then its armor, then its reactor. The explosion lit up the darkness of space, and for the first time, High Commander felt something he had not felt in decades. Fear. "Where are these ships coming from?" he demanded. "Our scouts reported no significant reinforcements in the area." His tactical officer checked his displays with trembling hands. "They are arriving from all directions, High Commander. Hundreds of hyperspace signatures. Civilian vessels, military ships, everything." Commander Vance arrived with her 4 frigates and immediately began coordinating the civilian fleet. She had spent her career negotiating with alien species, learning to see patterns and find solutions. Now she applied those skills to the chaos of battle. "All cargo vessels form on my signal," she broadcast. "Your hulls are thick. Your engines are powerful. We are going to use you as battering rams. Mining ships, your lasers can cut through their armor at close range. Get in close and carve them up." The civilian fleet responded with desperate enthusiasm. Captain Greg Mason piloted the Perseverance through the enemy line, broadcasting interference patterns that scrambled targeting systems. It was a trick he had learned while smuggling contraband through contested space, and it saved dozens of human ships as enemy weapons suddenly went wild. Dr. Cole used her survey vessel's advanced sensors to identify weak points in the formation. She broadcast the information to every human ship that could receive it, turning her peaceful science vessel into a tactical command center. Even the pirates came. Captain Cole and his crew of outlaws tore into the enemy flank with weapons they had salvaged and modified over years of running from the law. They fought dirty, targeting engines and weapon systems instead of trying to destroy ships outright. They crippled more enemy vessels in an hour than the entire lunar defense fleet had managed in 2. The fleet was not designed for this kind of battle. They were conquerors, not warriors. They were used to overwhelming their enemies with superior numbers and firepower, then watching them surrender or die. But the humans would not surrender, and they refused to die quietly. High Commander watched his tactical display turn from confident green to warning yellow to critical red. His fleet was being torn apart by creatures that should have been on their knees begging for mercy. His officers were screaming for orders, for retreat, for anything that would stop the slaughter. "We do not retreat," said through clenched teeth. "The Dominion has never retreated. We will crush these insects or die trying." It was a poor choice of words. Captain spotted the enemy flagship through the chaos of battle. It was the largest ship in the fleet, a massive command vessel bristling with weapons and armor. It should have been untouchable. Did not care what it should have been. "All ships focus on the flagship," he broadcast. Everything you have now." 30 human vessels turned their weapons on a single target. Military ships and cargo freighters and mining platforms and pirate vessels, all firing together. The flagship's shields flared and flickered under the combined assault. Then they failed. High Commander had just enough time to understand what was happening before the bridge exploded around him. His last thought was confusion. How had these primitive creatures defeated the might of the Dominion? He died without understanding. He died without knowing what made humans different from every other species that had conquered. Humans did not fight because they thought they could win. They fought because their home was worth dying for. And sometimes, just sometimes, that was enough to win anyway. The battle ended not with a grand explosion or a dramatic surrender, but with silence. One moment the void was filled with weapons fire and screaming engines and dying ships. The next moment there was nothing but debris drifting slowly through the darkness. The fleet was broken. Over 200 warships had been destroyed or disabled. The survivors, barely 50 vessels, had fled into hyperspace the moment their flagship exploded. They carried with them tales of madness and impossible courage, stories of a primitive species that refused to die no matter what was thrown at them. Admiral Laura emerged from her lunar bunker and stood on the surface of the moon for the first time in days. Above her, the blue and white marble of Earth hung in the black sky, untouched and unharmed. Around her, the wreckage of the greatest battle in human history drifted in silent orbit. Captain Ben stood beside her, reading the casualty reports in a voice that had gone hollow with grief. 112 human ships had been destroyed. 18,000 men and women had died in the battle. The lunar defense grid was in ruins. 3 orbital stations had been shattered. The Mars colony remained silent, its 50,000 inhabitants lost forever. "We won," Ben said, though the words sounded wrong in his mouth. Laura shook her head slowly. "We survived, that is enough." In the days that followed, the galaxy watched in stunned silence as humanity picked up the pieces. Search and rescue teams worked around the clock, pulling survivors from damaged ships and recovering the bodies of the fallen. Engineers began the long work of rebuilding the defense stations. Communication officers tried again and again to reach Mars, hopping against hope that someone had survived. No one had. The Galactic Accord sent observers to witness the aftermath. They were species who had dismissed Earth as a backwater curiosity, a primitive world barely worth noticing. They walked through the debris fields and the damaged stations and the overcrowded hospitals, and they saw something that changed their understanding of the universe. They saw humans who had lost everything still finding the strength to help their neighbors. They saw doctors who had not slept in days refusing to rest while patients still needed care. They saw engineers working with burned hands and broken bones because the work had to be done. They saw a species that had been pushed to the edge of extinction and had pushed back with everything they had. For the first time in the history of the Galactic Accord, alien species requested military alliance with a junior member. They had seen what the Dominion could do. They had also seen what humans could do when their home was threatened, and they knew which side they wanted to be on. Captain survived the battle, though his ship did not. The Nomad had been torn apart in the final assault on the enemy flagship, and had spent 6 hours floating in an escape pod before a rescue vessel found him. He woke up in a hospital on Earth, looking out a window at a blue sky he had not seen in over a decade. His sister came to visit him on the 3rd day. She had tracked him down through military records, and she stood in the doorway of his room for a long moment before either of them spoke. "You came back," she said finally. "I came home," replied. She crossed the room and hugged him, and for the first time in years, felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. Commander Vance was promoted to admiral for her actions during the battle. She had coordinated the civilian fleet with brilliance and courage, turning cargo ships into weapons and miners into soldiers. She accepted the promotion with quiet dignity. then immediately began planning for what came next. Because the war was not over, the Dominion still controlled over 200 worlds across the galaxy. They would rebuild their fleet. They would come back, and when they did, humanity needed to be ready. Captain Greg Mason returned to civilian life after the battle. He had lost the Perseverance, but he had gained something more valuable. The bounty on his head was quietly erased, and the cargo company that had blacklisted him offered him a new ship and a formal apology. He turned down the apology but took the ship. Dr. Cole went back to her research station, where her colleagues welcomed her as a hero. She did not feel like a hero. She felt like a scientist who had done what needed to be done, but she kept the tactical data from the battle stored in a secure file, just in case it was ever needed again. Even Captain Cole, the smuggler and outlaw, found his life changed by the battle. The governments that had hunted him for years offered full pardons in exchange for his service. He accepted, on the condition that his crew received the same treatment. They became the core of a new frontier patrol force, guarding the outer systems against any threat that might emerge from the darkness. Admiral Laura stood on the bridge of the newly commissioned battleship Defiant, watching the crew prepare for their first mission. The ship was everything the old lunar defense fleet had not been. Larger, faster, better armed. Built specifically to fight the enemies that humanity now knew existed in the galaxy. Captain stood beside her, restored to health and given command of the Defiant at her personal request. He had proven himself in the battle, and she needed officers who understood what they were fighting for. "The Dominion will come back," she said quietly. "They cannot allow our victory to stand. It would encourage other species to resist." Nodded, "Then we will be ready for them." More than ready. Laura turned to face him, and there was steel in her eyes. "We are not going to wait for them to attack us again. We are going to take the fight to them. We are going to liberate the worlds they have conquered. We are going to show the galaxy that no one threatens Earth and survives." Smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. It was the smile of a predator who had just realized that the hunt was about to begin. "Where do we start?" Laura handed him a data tablet showing the nearest outpost, a military station on the edge of their territory, lightly defended and full of intelligence about their fleet movements. "Here," she said, "the Dominion wanted to know what humans were made of. Let us go show them." The Defiant engaged its engines and vanished into the stars, the first ship of a fleet that would change the galaxy forever. Behind it, Earth spun slowly in the light of its sun, blue and green and beautiful. They had answered the call. They had fought against impossible odds and won. They had paid a terrible price in blood and grief and loss. And now they were coming for the ones who had tried to destroy them. The universe would never forget the sound.